Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. Rachel DeAlto is back on the show. I am so excited to have this conversation with you because we're kind of doing like a 2-for-1. We're talking about your book and my book.
It's a good day. Well, I
think
they pair together really well.
They do pair together. They're like pizza and beer, as we were talking about before.
Which could get a little dangerous in there.
Makes you burp. Right. And for those people who are just listening to this and not watching it on video, I feel like you should go watch it on video. But I keep having to make sure, because I so very rarely wear lipstick. I keep having to look at myself to make sure I don't have lipstick on my teeth.
Yeah, I'm good too, I think. Although I make myself so small that like I can't even tell how I look. It actually helps me.
Oh, you back up from the camera.
I'm
right in front of the camera.
Please make it stop.
So if anyone hears like sucking noises, please know it's just me trying to get the lipstick off my teeth. I apologize in advance. All right. Speaking of awkwardness, I want to find out by asking you, the expert, what is the difference between just regular nervousness and legit social anxiety?
Huge difference. So I think a lot of people misuse social anxiety as a term because we're all a little nervous. We're all a little awkward. I don't like to call doctors' offices either, but social anxiety is actually a diagnosable mental condition. I hate the word disorder, but that's actually what it's called. So it's in the DSM, which is how all therapists and psychologists, psychiatrists diagnose people with disorders. And there's actually criteria for people with social anxiety. It's like that really marked fear. And the difference is social anxiety is I'm terrified of being judged. I think I'm going to do something dumb. I think I'm going to embarrass myself and I'm going to do something in a situation and people are going to judge me. I'm going to feel humiliated, and it's consistent. So it actually starts getting in the way of their lives.
So does that also include like agoraphobia, people who are afraid to leave their house or like crowds of people?
Yeah, it's all of those things can kind of be, they can be comorbidities because they go together. As soon as you start feeling socially anxious, you're like, oh my gosh, why would I leave my house? And then it can translate into other diagnoses, but they could be separate as well. So, but very related.
So I guess like the kind of definitive, the guideline is when it's affecting your life chronically.
Yeah, the diagnosis is 6 months or more. So it's 6 months or more, and then a marked impact on your life. Which even with that as like a real diagnosis, it's an enormous problem in the United States. I think the last time I looked at it, this was pre-COVID. It was like 50 million people suffer from social anxiety. So it is really prevalent.
Do you think it's always been like that, or are people just being diagnosed more?
I think anxiety, obviously, I think we're just, as a species, we've become more anxious. So it's definitely increased over time. But I think that the awareness, you know what I mean? It's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like we're getting more anxious, but we're also more aware. And it being a diagnosis, we have something to pinpoint it on instead of before. It's like, no, they're just nervous. You know what I mean? As opposed to really understanding what this is.
Okay. And I don't want people to walk away from this feeling like, wait, I need to know more. So I have one more question about this. And that's, can you give some examples of like, what does it actually mean to like get in the way of someone's life? Like, what are they doing or not doing?
They're not saying yes to anything. They're avoiding contact. They limit their interactions to online. They don't want to have that live interaction with people. So they're not taking certain jobs. They're not going out to events. They are not connecting with friends or any sort of relationship because there's so much fear around, what if I screw this up? Like, what if I act like, and it's that, complete disproportionate fear where it's like, this is not real. Like, you're not that awkward. But it feels physical. I mean, there's studies where people show up with anxiety attacks at hospitals thinking they have a heart attack. Like, it's a real feeling. So.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and panic disorder in 2003, which feels like a lifetime ago. But I never had that crippling feeling of being anxious in like one-on-one scenarios or people that I already trusted. I didn't have that. So it sounds like that's what the difference is. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
fascinating diagnosis.
yeah,
Sucks, but
it's, and I
fascinating.
think probably widely misunderstood.
100%. Yeah, I think a lot of people think introverted people are just, they have social anxiety. I'm like, no, they're just naturally introverted. There's a
Mhm.
huge difference between introversion and being socially anxious. So
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
I'm
and
gonna
this
go
is
do a
sort of,
TikTok on this.
it's just, of course you are. Everyone needs to go follow Rachel on TikTok and me.
Yes. Hey, Andrea Owen.
Hey, stay back. We'll put those links in the show notes and the link to the previous episode that you were on, because we talked about, I think we talked about friendships.
It's forever
Something. We talked about
ago. Oh
something
my God, because
interesting.
we've been friends for a while.
Something fascinating. Yes.
We talked about something. Well,
We talked about
that's a good
something.
one.
We did. And it was interesting, that I can tell you. Well, speaking of talking, what is wrong with how people are communicating these days?
Well, I think because it's completely online is a problem.
Mhm.
Not completely, obviously. People are still talking in person, but most of our interactions are coming from social media, some sort of online interaction. And you're only getting that one element of it. And especially with social, you and I both know this. We're on social media and it's like, that's not real. Like, I
Right.
see people all the time posting about relationships that they're miserable in. I'm like, what are we doing
Mhm.
here? So we're just not being real with each other. And then we wonder, why we feel intimidated or why we feel judged. And it's like, well, that's because no one's being real. So I know authenticity is this buzzword that people throw around. I almost feel like it's like jumping the shark actively right now, but it's honestly the truth. It's like there has to be some reality in our conversation and vulnerability and being like, you know what, I'm a normal person with flaws and
Mhm.
all those things. And instead we feel like if we can separate ourselves and not be face to face, even on like a video face to face moment, we feel like we can put on a different persona and then we're not having any sort of meaningful connection.
Mhm. Mhm. What is well, what can someone do? I think, well, you tell me, is this something that you feel like is more prevalent with the younger generation, or is it across all
Yes.
generations?
I think it's starting to permeate all of us as,
Mhm.
even the boomers get online and are more active on social media because it's an addiction. We
Yeah.
we all get in there
It's
and those.
legitimately, yeah, doing things to our brain.
Right? Yeah, it changes our neurotransmitters, and so we get in there and we start using it, and we're like, oh, this is what this is what they're all talking about. But yeah, no, it's a huge problem. Think back to when we were growing up. We're going to date ourselves right now, but
Yeah.
like there was no social media. I didn't have social media until I was already married with children,
Mhm.
so it didn't affect me in my earlier stages of development. But then you look at the stages of development, you look at how really malleable children are, and then you throw in some social media and you show in like, oh my gosh, the people who get the most likes or most interactions are the better ones. And then all of a sudden they're judging themselves from a completely different standard. And it's changing the way that we connect to people. And it's creating that disconnect between
Mhm.
ourselves and other people.
It's really interesting, and the jury is still out a little bit in terms of like what the implications are of this age group that has not known anything but cell phones and internet and things like that. And I'm a little bit older than you, but you're on the very young end of Gen X, right?
Yep.
You're, what are they called? Xennials, like where you're kind of on the cusp.
Yeah. Nobody gives us a name. Nobody
Nobody
cares
knows.
about us.
Okay.
Yeah.
But my point is that I thought it's interesting that kids these days, I'm going to say that, don't know
Aw,
how
get
to
off my lawn.
don't drive slower on my street, which is a real complaint I have. But about making phone calls, like
Oh my gosh.
I feel like we're the last generation who, and not all of us, and generally speaking here, my parents, like it was a thing to like, you call, hello, Mrs. DeAlto, this is Andrea, may I please speak to Sophia?
Yep.
And you introduce yourself, you address the person and you ask it was like this whole thing. And my kids, first of all, didn't get to like hold the phone to their ear. Like when I hand it to them to talk to my mom or something, they're like, I don't know what to do with this. And they don't want to go and make friends in the neighborhood.
No,
We had to
it's the most
practice.
bizarre thing. Yeah. I'm actually having that conversation with my daughter now. Our daughters at the same age. They're both into
Mhm.
anime and they rather sit home and like watch anime all day. And I'm like, honey, you have to go make friends. Like you can't just, this cannot be your entire existence because I see how it affects her. I see how it like disconnects people. But yeah, it's 100%, it's just another way of living. But The interesting thing is too, because there has been research around this, and my God, I feel like I just got really boring.
Let me tell you about the research. Let me
Oh
put
my
my
God,
readers on.
but it's so true. It's like I started looking into this because I'm like, holy crap, like what's going on here? And it really did show the more invested that we are, like the more emotionally invested that they are, the more problematic it is. And that's where it's such a problem, because if they are emotionally invested, then they're focusing more on this than they are about these real world connections. And I think our kids, we have to like almost force them out,
We do too.
to
Mhm.
do things beyond their comfort zone, because if they're comfortable, like they will never make a phone call again. And who's going
Right.
to order my pizza?
Just call a Gen Xer. Just don't call them. Text a Gen
I'm going to
Xer,
call you.
and they will all make the appointment. And yeah, but no, we have to teach these kids this. So how does someone? It sounds like. And like, are the majority of your clients like they don't necessarily struggle with social anxiety? It's just like that overall feeling of awkwardness of being a human, right?
Yeah, I think there's a mix. I don't work with people individually anymore, but like from my experience, just talking to the people that I work around, is that a thing?
Talking at them.
But the feedback is there's a mix. There are people with legitimate social anxiety in, my audiences or in my groups. And then there are people who are just awkward and feel uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
it's a lack of confidence or a lack of self-worth that really does originate a lot of that. And honestly, a lot of the social anxiety does come from that as well. So it's kind of a definite hodgepodge. But I think social anxiety, people are like, no, 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 that's what I have. And I'm like, we might want to take a look at that in
Yeah.
a minute.
Maybe, maybe not. Well, I'm convinced that life is just one series of awkward conversations and situations after
Yes.
another. And I don't know if I've just kind of gotten used to it, but I feel awkward most of the time and I just kind of like fumble through. So tell us how a person would like what's helpful for them to feel less socially awkward.
I think it really does come back to self-worth and confidence. The
Mhm.
more that you start to embrace who you are, flaws and all, and your goofiness. Like, I remember I did a photo shoot. This is like 10 years ago before we even met, for my first book, which was really shitty and no one should buy it. Um, it's so bad. I
Will
just
not
wanted to
link
do
to it
media.
then.
Yeah, do not link to that. It was self-published. It was like one of those, like I just wanted to do more TV at the time. And anyway, so I did a photo shoot for it. And I just remember being in this New York City loft, really cool, and like this really cool outfit on. My hair and makeup was all done up and I wasn't a hot mess. And he's like, give me sexy. And I'm like, I just started laughing. I was
I don't
like,
even know what that
here's
is.
what I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you goofy, and you're going to find something good here. Like, what are you
Just
talking
start
about?
shooting, yeah.
It was just this awkwardness to it, but there was also an owning of who I was in that moment of like, no, like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not me. So I
Mhm.
think so often we're awkward because we think we have to show up in a different way. When in fact, if we just show up and we're like, listen, I am who I am, take me
Mhm.
or leave me. And that does come with age, but it also can come with experience that can be developed sooner than getting to 40. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I don't really care what you think anymore.
Age does help. You know what I found is helpful is sometimes just naming it. Like I'm a queen of like just saying out loud things that I probably shouldn't say out loud sometimes, but I've said it. Like, when I'm having a conversation with someone I haven't talked to in a really long time, and I'll just be like, this is so awkward. It doesn't mean
Yep.
I don't like the person. It just means I'm
Yeah.
feeling very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Which is completely normal. And that's a great way to handle it.
Oh, okay, thanks. I'm gonna
I like that. I
check
think
that box.
when you call out the elephant in the room, things are a lot easier to
Well,
embrace. Yeah.
let's talk about self-confidence because you mentioned that. Like, how do you like what is your take on this? How can someone start to feel more confident?
I think there's a lot of ways. Obviously, you and I talk about this for a living, but I think there's so many different ways that you can approach it, and you have to find the one that starts to resonate for you. One of the
Mhm.
things I like to do is just really starting to identify, what do I do well, and how can I push that boundary a little bit more? Because the more that we show ourselves that we're capable, the more that we're able to grow from that. So, self confidence is a lack of it is doubt. And you can disprove that doubt by doing things and showing that you're capable. And then the other element is really identifying the root of it, because so often I think we just kind of sit there and we're like, yo, I don't feel good about myself. Why? Where
Yeah.
does that come from? And follow that root down, because whether it's a family of origin issue or some environmental issue or some relationship challenge that you've had, even sometimes when you reveal it, it starts to heal it. I think
Mhm.
there's a Jay-Z quote, you can't
I
heal what you don't
I
reveal.
feel like that is, and if you don't know now, you know. You're welcome. No charge for
No,
the entertainment.
all day.
It's a
We do this all
bonus.
day.
Well, that's super interesting. I agree with those root causes. It could come from family of origin. It could come from like a past relationship that happened when someone was not very nice to you, and environment. I call that patriarchy, that we grew up in and by we, I mean people who identify as women, who grew up identifying as girls and women. We grow up in a culture that does not necessarily foster self-esteem, self-confidence, things like that in girls. I was talking to somebody else about this, the research that I read, that I don't know if you've seen this research, that because we assign gender roles, little boys are encouraged to wrestle with other children, and they also like tease and taunt each other playfully more than girls do. Like it's different how they do it. I even made a comment to my husband many years ago, and I'm like, why do guys just like shovel shit back and forth to each other? Like they just razz each other so much more, I
Nonstop.
think, than women do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, it's just something that we do. And then when I read that research, I was like, oh, this is something that they're taught to do from childhood. And
Yeah.
what that does, the long-term effects of that is instills resilience in them, instills
Aw.
confidence in them,
Should I start
and
making
that
fun
they
of
just
you?
feel competent. Yes. No, no, time's up. I'm 46. It's not going to work anymore. If I was 6, maybe. But just it's really interesting that the long-term effects from that, and that men just grow up, that's how they just, kind of feel entitled, and like, of course it's going to work out.
Yeah, it's also when you start to think about it, it's a safe space because it's like, yeah, my
Right.
friends are mocking me or they're beating me up, but they love me. And
Right.
it's like,
They're going to
it's
have my
different.
back.
Yeah, it's different than getting bullied. Like I went through like hell when I was younger because I was bullied for years and years until I had to switch schools. It was so bad. And so I think back to that and I'm like, wait, I was made fun of. And it did develop resilience, but I also developed an
Right.
eating disorder and a lack of self-esteem and self-worth for like 12 years. Um, so
A
I
little
think I
different.
missed something. I feel like
A little different.
so but yeah, it must
Right.
be like that safe space that's attached to it. And these are my people and this is normal. So we really missed the boat
Exactly.
on that. All right. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
know what
it's
to do with this.
it's super interesting. I know. Now here we are decades later. What do we do now? And I love your tip around, finding what you do well and doing more of that, because I think that instills the competence part of it that is so heavily involved in self-confidence. What do you when you talk about, because in the book I talk about taking up space, with your
Mhm.
voice or with your body. What is your take on that around taking up space?
I think it comes with confidence. I think
Mhm.
that people who are lacking in self confidence, they want to become as small as possible. And it kind of
Right.
goes back to that social anxiety. Like, I'm afraid of being seen. I'm afraid of doing the wrong thing. Like, oh my gosh, like, you want me to take up what? I'm going to go in the closet now and be as small as possible. So I think taking up space requires confidence. It requires knowing that your taking up of that space is worthwhile to other people. And so that has to come with some sort of self-worth.
Mhm. Self-worth, I feel like, is one of those things that I've talked about this on my podcast previously, that it's interesting because I think it can be a little bit insidious. And what I mean by that is it can present itself in different ways. And in my experience, like I felt like, and then I uncovered this with my therapist recently, that I told her, I said, I can sit here and tell you both consciously and unconscious, I feel like I'm worthy. Like I feel like I'm a good person, and that I matter to people and to the world. What my real biggest fear is that deep down, no one really gives a shit about me. And so
Mm.
that's inextricably connected, but not exactly
Yeah.
the same thing. And that
Yeah.
was such an aha moment to me of like, oh my God, it's an element of self-worth. It's like its first cousin.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting. And I think we all have those little like spin-offs.
Right.
We have like the main series, and then there's like spin-off shows of like, okay, no, this one's good, but that spin-off show, whoo, and the human mind and emotion is so complicated that,
Mhm.
I think about we talk about weight, especially as women, it
Mhm.
becomes such a focus of
Oh,
like
yeah.
our bodies. And I feel the same way. Like I am very comfortable in my skin, and yet I always want to lose 5 pounds. Like there's never
Mhm.
been a time in my life. I think it was 10 for a while, and now it's down to 5. So I'm really making
Yeah.
progress here. But otherwise, and it's such a dichotomy because you look at it and you're like, wait a second, like I am confident, like I feel comfortable. However, there's still that sliver of like, no, I'd be even better with this.
Mhm.
And it's really coming to terms with that and recognizing like, where does that come from and how does that affect me and how can I avoid allowing it to affect me in a negative way? If it makes me inspired in a positive way, it's one thing, but if it definitely interferes with some area of my life or it allows me to show up in a way where I don't feel like I'm entitled to take up space, then we have a problem.
Yeah. Well, it's the internalized misogyny for me. Like that's what I'm realizing that so much of it comes back to that, like diet culture. Um, anyway, that's another conversation for another
Yeah, that's a
time.
whole other day, girl.
Well, okay, and you may have already answered this, but I wanted to ask you about, we touched on it a little around women specifically. The majority of my listeners are women who make themselves small, not literally, which I know is a thing that, that last 5 pounds, but
Yeah.
figuratively, like making themselves small. How do you see that play out for women, like in their careers and in their relationships?
Well, they don't take chances and they accept what they think they deserve. And
Oh, the crumbs.
yeah, the friggin' crumbs. I actually said that to
Mhm.
someone the other day. She's going through a breakup and she's allowing him to still contact her and then holding out hope that he'll allow them to get back together. And I was like, why are you settling for crumbs? Like you deserve the whole damn cake.
Mhm.
And yeah, I see that over and over again with, if you are playing small, it means that you're not going to push for the better job. You're not going to push for the promotion or the raise or go outside of your comfort zone into something that you want, but you feel like it's too much of a risk. And it's the same thing in relationships. You get the safety zone, and sometimes that safety zone comes with toxicity and sometimes abuse to certain levels, and
Mhm.
people accept so much less than they really truly deserve, but that's what they think they deserve.
I like that metaphor of, like a plate of food and, it's like if your plate of food is your safety zone, like what is actually on the plate? And in my former relationship, I'm thinking of, it was so many shitty things that I didn't want to eat.
You're like, there's some pickles over
I
here covered
am
in
not
chocolate.
hungry for that name calling, for that intimidation. I'm
Yep.
full, full.
Yeah. Yeah,
No.
but we fill ourselves up on that bullshit because we think that's what we actually have earned.
Yeah, and for me, it was a matter of that I just got used to it and it became my normal, which is so weird.
Oh my gosh. No, we acclimate to what we're used to. And that's
Right.
actually also why we repeat, family of origin challenges
Mhm.
or conditions because we're used to it. I remember there was a situation in the last like month where something really acrimonious came up. Like it was very negative and confrontational. And I was like, oh my God, this is so awful. Like
Mhm,
it was just
mhm.
so uncomfortable for me. And I'm like, what's your life? Like,
Yeah.
that was my entire marriage. That was my job. I was a litigator. Like it was
Mm.
always this conflict. And now I have none of it, and I've had none of it for 10 years. But if that had happened back then, I'd be like, huh, that was
Just another
Tuesday.
day. Mhm, right.
Yeah. So we do become acclimated to it until we take a step outside of it and we're able to look at it and say, oh, wait a second, that doesn't always feel so good.
That's the really difficult part is that when it's right in front of your face, you don't see how bad it is. I remember
Yeah.
we needed a new mattress and we talked about it for like, I don't even know how long we were together before we got this new mattress. It was a handful of years. And then we got the new mattress and we were like, okay, that other mattress was so bad. Like we didn't know how bad it was. Like we were sleeping on a bag of rocks. Like what were we thinking? And I think it's
Yeah.
similar. And I'm 15 years out of my former relationship. And I'm still figuring things out and connecting the dots and going like, holy shit, that's what was happening. And that's some steps out. And it took me a handful of years to even start to see it. So I say all that to have compassion for people who might be in it or might be like newly out of it. Like people might be telling you, he's no good for you. She's not the right person for you, like, and warning you and wanting better for you, but you don't see it. And like, maybe like in your gut, you're like, yeah, probably, but you don't take any action.
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah, no, it's a process. And I think people do have to be compassionate with themselves and also take those baby steps. Some people, I'm a rip off the Band-Aid kind of girl, but that shit hurts.
Yeah.
And I'm resilient. I know myself enough that I can handle the aftermath of it. But for some people, it's like, you got to be able to baby step out of things. And
Were
then
you
even
always
through those
like
baby
that?
steps.
Like the resilience part?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, as long as I can, as an adult, as long as I can remember. I mean, I had my son when I was
Where do you
20
think
years
that?
old and
Oh, that's right. Do you think that
threw
that
him
was
on my
part of what
back.
made you so resilient, or?
No, I actually think I was, honestly, and this is something going back to like the whole bullying and razzing of friends. So I didn't have friends, but I was bullied, and I was forced to kind of go through things in a really terrible way, but it also made me stronger. And I think I developed a lot of my resilience to just work through that. And then when I was able to shift to the other side, my bullying happened when I was younger. And then by high school, things had kind of become really great for me. And so having those balance of the two, where I was able to look back, I was able to start reflecting really young, at 14. And then by the time I had my son, I was like, no, I got this. Like, I'm still going to be a badass.
Yeah. And you were 19 when you had him?
20.
You were 20.
Yep.
Wow.
Crazy.
Okay.
Crazy.
Is there anything else that I might have missed that you really want to talk about? I mean, besides everybody going out and buying your book?
No, we covered a lot of different elements in like a very short period of time.
We did. We get it done. So everyone, the book is Relatable. Tell me the subtitle.
It's How to Connect with Anyone, Anywhere, Even if it scares you.
How to Connect Anyone, Anywhere, Even if it scares you. Fantastic. And your beautiful face is on the cover. The link will be in the show notes. Where do you want people to follow you or go to your site? What's going on?
Yeah,
Tell us everything.
Got site. There's the social superpowers quiz on my site, which is really helpful to identifying what your social superpower is. Say that 3 times fast.
Social superpowers. How many different ones are there to choose from?
There's 4.
Okay.
And then I have a longer assessment that allows you to really break that down. But there's the free quiz that's right there that will help you realize what your superpower is. So
what are the 4 superpowers? I want to know what mine are.
We have the builder, the analyst, the captain, and the ringleader.
So is the builder somebody who like connects people?
Builder is slow and steady. So they're kind of like, they build the foundation first. They
gotcha.
Like the drywall goes on after the
foundation.
So
okay.
The builder takes me. I'm a builder. It takes me a minute, but once I'm in there, it's like constant, like, let's just keep growing.
And then the other ones are ringleader.
Ringleader is kind of, I wanted to call it a cheerleader, but I didn't want to have to give out pom-poms every time. But yeah, it's like that ringleader, that person that's like kind of the hype person.
Okay.
And then there's the captain, who's always in charge and always has a lot of really strong opinions on things. And then there's the analyst, which is kind of that overthinker, but sometimes really helpful in terms of their overthinking.
Okay. All right. I'm probably a combination of the captain and the ringleader.
I could see that.
I'm not an analyst, and I don't take things.
No, I'm not an analyst either. Yeah, definitely not an analyst. Yeah, I definitely have some ringleader. I'm a ringleader builder, but if you had to go with a primary, I would be a builder.
Okay. And so they can take that quiz on your site?
They can.
Okay. RachelDeAlto.com.
Yep. That's where that is. That's where I
Link
live.
is in the show notes and links to Rachel's books and her social media. Thank you so much for being here. This is so fun. Always a pleasure.
I always love talking to you.
Same. Thank you everyone for listening. And you know the drill, please take a screenshot of this wherever you are listening to this podcast, share it on your Instagram stories or on Facebook. If you're on Instagram, you can tag me and Rachel, and I always do my best to repost it. And remember everyone, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now.